Okay, it's 1:30 and it's time on our schedule for a planning hearing, and this is on a fee schedule update, AM 0008-22. And before we start, we'll go through the normal process. There's no one here with the public. There's no one online, so I'm not going to worry about visual or hearing. Actually, do the commissioners have any visual or hearing impairments they deal with?
No more than normal.
And reading.
We all are of that age, so yeah. Calls for conflict. Any conflict?
Commissioner
Commissioner McDonald, I have no conflict. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to staff and we'll take a look at what we got here.
We'll kind of just start with the subject summary. I'm just going to kind of pull from the staff report that I prepared.
Okay.
So anytime that the commissioners want to update or revise fees in a greater or increase in greater than 5%, or anytime you want to institute a new fee, a hearing is required. So if it was less than 5, we could just, publish it and call it good and be done. But in this case, we're proposing a number of changes, most of which are more than 5%, and then adding some new fees in Title 11, Title 12, and Title 14. Title 11 and Title 12 were updated, I think it was August of last year. Title 14 hasn't been updated since 2018. So you'll see some kind of substantial changes to Title 14, and given just data we've received since then on how long it takes to process these, and we'll get into that as we get in. So with that being said, I think the best way to do this, I have an Excel spreadsheet I can share. We can go line by line. I can give you as much detail as you want and answer any questions. So think of it kind of like a open meeting, less of a presentation style, more of a.
Do we need, have all the commissioners had a chance to go through this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know that we necessarily need to go line by line, but I do
Okay.
have one question if you don't mind to start
Sure.
with. On the technology fee,
Yep.
we raised it $5.
Mhm.
Was that enough to cover the new software package that we got for?
Yes, so $5, that increase is applied to every BLP and every land use action.
That
So
was
it's
my biggest
every
concern, is that
file
we made
type.
sure first and foremost that we capture that.
So let me just kind of hit some of the highlights, and then we can have some discussion on some of the other items then,
Okay.
if you don't want to go by specifics. So the methodology behind this increase is I took all of staff's wages, I took estimations on time for each one of the file types, and I did a whole bunch of math rather than just throwing a bunch of numbers out there on how long does it actually take. For Title 11, we incorporated compliance in their time. So we tried to get, and then manager's time and then admin time, right? So everyone that touches a file and everything it takes to go from, we received it out the door, we're trying to get a net neutral, right? Or at least that's the hope, is that revenues equal expenditures. So that being said, one area is this floodplain review. Every file gets a floodplain review. We have one guy whose job is almost dedicated entirely. I think 80% of his time is on floodplain. So most of which is a floodplain review that we don't capture a fee for. So we've added this $25 fee. Pick a seat or three. So we've added this floodplain review fee to capture his time he spends on these files. So and that's, Jason Johnson's time. So other than that, kind of some typical increases throughout the board. We've seen a large number of cell tower come through, and those do take, besides the CUP, they do take a substantial review, and it takes a lot longer to review those. So we've captured that in that fee update. So one discussion we've been having is this, the small structure permit. We didn't propose a fee because it's a new one that we changed last year. Same with decks and lean-tos. We get so few of these and they're really fast. When we review those, it's a fairly cursory review. There's not a whole lot of depth into them. They're small structures, that they're not dwellings. It's, your typical, shop or shed that's larger than 200 square feet. So, the change in the floodplain review, adding that's going to add a $25 fee. The change in the technology is going to add $5 to that, because it all applies to this as well. So one thing we could do is decrease this small structure to kind of accommodate those if we want to maintain, how it was before.
I don't think, the fees are so meager. I would just leave them the way they are. And for a couple of reasons. One is that I want to make sure that we capture that additional cost for the software, because there's also going to be license renewals every year and that type of thing that we need to make sure we cover those as well. And just so you're aware, member of the public, one member of the public, You missed the first part where you talked about he went through and did this kind of exhaustive study of how long it actually takes. We're trying to reach a net neutral so that people who are applying for the permit are actually paying for the entire cost, labor and everything involved in it.
Yeah.
So that's what these new fees reflect. So it doesn't get pushed onto all the other taxpayers.
Gotcha.
So the only other thing that I would add to that, and we talked about this a little bit, and he says that, you know, I guess this goes kind of like both ways. So we're raising to cover the fees, but this is actually more than what he feels it would, what it costs. So
Right.
if we're sticking to that, if we're trying to actually hit, and he's done a fairly extensive study of all these different
Mhm.
fees and what it costs to take care of them. The fees that you're talking about, Dan, though, they're collected regardless.
Right.
So the technology fee would still apply, and same
Right.
with that floodplain. So what we could do is, if you wanted to decrease the small structure to 150 net, we'd still gain those other two fees that would cover those two reviews.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not
Yeah.
taking it from one hand and putting it out of the other hand. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
and if you have a recommendation for value, we can fix that right now.
I think 150 would still cover the amount of time it takes staff. Like I
Okay.
said, I chatted with the permit techs and Bill, and it's like a half an hour per person to an hour, depends on the complexity. And really what comes into what takes a lot more time is if any of these are proposed near lakes, streams, rivers, that kind of stuff, it comes into some other code. So, but oftentimes that's covered or captured under like floodplain review as well. So,
Okay. Yeah, for
I
that, if you
think
want
I'm
to change
into
that.
that.
go ahead
I
and
think-
change it.
I think that
Okay.
if we're raising them based on something, that we can also look at them to go the other way.
okay.
I just, as I looked through these fees and I looked at some of the other counties just a night ago, and then looked at counties in other states, and we are still so cheap.
We are very low. You're right.
That's
So, other than that, so again, that's just for small structures at 1,080 square feet or less. If they get above that, it falls under this detached garage.
Right.
So it hits this fee bracket here. So that's just what used to be the DES, the Declaration of Exempt Structure. So, and that's, yeah. This time extension request, we made a change that we increase it to 75. The technology fee still applies. We've been receiving more of those, and it does take longer to process those than we initially thought. We've been receiving a lot more appeals of administrative decisions. For reference, Kootenai County charges $1,350, if I remember right, for an appeal administrative decision. That's those come right to the board for a hearing, and $130 isn't enough to cover that hearing cost for staff time and then to prepare staff reports on top. Because typically, if it's a BLP or a vacation rental permit, we had an appeal of that earlier this year. So that's these administrative decisions. So when we looked over the amount of time it takes to process those type of appeals, that's where we've increased to that $500.
Okay.
So, and that's about it for
If we
Title
increase it
11.
$10,000, we won't get any more administrative appeals. No, I'm just
That
kidding.
is an
It was
option.
just a joke for the record.
Yeah.
Go back to the Mike Brown days.
These investigation fees and whatnot, that's all under compliance, and we feel those are still adequate.
Okay.
Moving on to Title 12, so I've restructured some of these fee schedules. It used to be redundant. We'd see technology fee in each one of the sections. So I just added it to the top of each section to make it a little bit easier and tell it where it applies. So we've added a section for recording fees. We just say, hey, as per recorder's office. So if they change their fees, we'll just accommodate whatever their fee schedule is. We had some talks. I should go back to Title 11. We had some talks on adding the solid waste fee and collecting that. We met with solid waste, and their policy, we determined that it would be too difficult on planning staff to gain the knowledge that their front office staff has and answer all those questions and have this dual role. So instead, what we've done is added them as a sign off, similar to Road and Bridge or GIS when someone requires a
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, so now they have InterGov access. They mark it off as complete. We just send folks down there saying, okay, you need to go get a sign off from them, and then they can determine whether or not they're going to apply that fee and charge them, and they'll sign it off and move it along. So I think it captures both, the best of both scenarios there. So that's just a process change, no fees being updated for that. Let's see. We're not changing any of the fees for GIS. I just added them here because we're moving them into this miscellaneous fee use section. So no changes there. We've added a hearing examiner fee. So to cover the cost or some portion of the cost for hearing examiner based on that contract. So I believe other counties charge dollar for dollar, but then their land use fees are a little bit less than ours are. So I think the increase in the file types that the hearing examiner would review, so variances and CUPs, subdivisions, covers the cost of that person's review. So with this $50 fee in addition to, so we can continue as we get more data on this to kind of do that analysis and maybe propose a change to it next time. We've got a number of these requests to reschedule hearing by an applicant. That's where that $250, that increase from 105. We've taken out some of this administrative burden of how much it costs us to mail it and go through the, so rather than, and I've done this kind of throughout, rather than look back and what did it cost us, the actual this and that, we're just increasing the base fee to cut out some of that administrative burden on the admin side, and just, capture it that way. So increase in plat fees, increase in MLDs, nothing substantial. There's one other. Oh, so the development agreement review. So that's a new fee that covers that cost of if a zone change. So we have that new code section that was recently applied for or recently adopted for a development agreement.
Mhm.
So given the time it's going to take, it's mostly going to be on management and then on legal for review of these, right? So we're adding a fee to cover that cost of the review. We didn't touch the appeal for on that side. Amendments. So this is the other section we took a hard look at. So amendments to the comprehensive plan text and then amendments to Title 12, and that would be Title 12 text, right? We've increased those fees fairly substantially because we've gotten some data points. In the last year, we've received 2 different text amendments, and those take a lot of time. They take a lot of staff's time. They take a lot of management time to review, to analyze that the effect this code that proposed code change would have on the code. So some of those have taken multiple hearings, of which the original base fee of $525 and $700 just doesn't help, right? It doesn't cover. And then we added this amendments to the comprehensive plan map. And this is the same fee structure that the zone change fee has. That review is almost identical, right? So that's a comp plan map change and then a zone change. It's similar reviews, similar amount of time from planning staff. So we've added that and kind of differentiated the comp plan text, which we haven't had an application for that. No one's applied to change the comp plan text. It's always been the map. So that's where we've come up with that fee base from. And that's about it for Title 12. Any questions on that? Okay. So I went right to Jason. He's our sole person currently reviewing floodplain. So that's where all these fee updates came from. Again, we took out some of that the administrative burden of figuring out how much it costs for noticing, and we just increased that base to cover that. So we feel like this should cover his time as it is now. We can kind of look at this going forward. The big one was that structure located within, so they went from 300 to 800. He's received a number of those, and they do take a lot more of his time. So that's where that came from.
That's it.
And that's about it. Yeah. We've received no public comments. We've received I think a couple agencies of no comments. So nothing for our analysis side for comment wise.
So the investigation fees,
Mhm.
that get charged to.
That's if those come into effect with violations.
Right.
So, and then if they go out and they said, okay, we fixed it, and they go out, no, we didn't, there's a reinspection fee. Okay, we have to come out again and again and again. Think of that, the guy who built his RV park essentially and added a bunch of, every single time we had to go out there and review that, we hit him with another one of those fees to cover the fuel, the investigators' time.
Pay that
Mhm.
and our apparatus for getting the pay for that.
Yes, we invoice them
But
essentially.
that notice to Tyler.
Yeah, and if they don't pay, yeah.
Okay, any further discussion by the commissioners? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the amended version, because we did make one
Yep,
change.
we made one change.
Approve the amended version of the fee schedule.
Chairman, I make a motion to approve the amended fee schedule as provided,
You're gonna say as amended.
of resolution 2022-49.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion, and a second. All those in favor say aye. Oh, this roll call vote. Roll call vote. Aye.
Aye. Oops, you gotta think about it.
Yeah, that's just it.
Getting old. I mean,
Perhaps I was trying to add a little suspense to an otherwise mundane day. Yeah. Okay.
Wait for.
So it is 1:46 and we'll go ahead and adjourn this hearing.
Did you want to call for public?
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to comment?
That one, right?
she does want to comment. No, Rick.
I should have
Sorry.
stopped you.
I'm not going to make you revote. This has nothing. Jake, I'm wondering if this has anything. Oh, Anissa Keith Sagal. Does this have anything to do with inflation?
Part of it does, yes, yeah. Just,
Let's call it.
sure. Yeah, we can chat
Part
after.
of it does, and part of it is just making sure that we're keeping up with cost, incurred costs by applications.
Maybe we can just blame Russia.
It's Russia. It's the Ukrainian conflict that's causing this. No,
Iraqis. Working through Russia.
or it's racism, one of the two. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wrote a bunch of buzzwords. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments from the public?
No.
And we have no one online for the record.
Okay. So that was one.